be prepared to work. It's a lot of work. There's a lot more work than you realize, and it doesn't matter what business you're getting into. So if you don't like to work, if you're not willing to work, don't just go work for somebody else, because it's a lot less work working 9 to 5 for somebody else than it is for an entrepreneur. So you better be prepared to work. If you're not willing to put in extra hours, I don't think it's ever going to work as an entrepreneur. That's just my opinion. Everybody I know that's been successful as an entrepreneur has just had a crazy work ethic and been able to, just do what it takes, be able to do things that they never expect to do to make their business work.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as a founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where he helps startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours? Just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always here to help. Now, today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Steve Gerritsen. And full disclosure, Steve is a client of the firm, Miller IP Law. So all the better and even more fun to have him on. But as a quick introduction to Steve, so he played high school baseball, in his own words, wasn't the best player, but was a sports junkie. And then went on a 2-year mission for his church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or otherwise nicknamed LDS or Mormon. Then he came home and realized that he wasn't good enough to play in college baseball. And so with that, he started his first business he went off to school, started his first business while he was a freshman in college. I think started the business about 2 weeks into the semester, had a goal to graduate and to apply to be an NFL agent. And so with that, he graduated. Next month, he applied to be an NFL agent, was for about 4 years or so, got out of the business for a period of time, did some work for startups in LA, got back into the business, became an agent again for a sports division in LA, and then again found himself not wanting to be an agent. So then started a streaming platform for high school and college students, and he'll get into a bit more of what that is. And so with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Steve.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So, and I just took a much longer journey and condensed in the 30-second version. So let's unpack that a bit and tell us how your journey got started playing high school baseball.
I just grew up playing baseball, so that was my favorite sport growing up. I liked all sports. I liked basketball, but I just never had that talent. Wasn't talented enough to, wasn't the football player that other kids are. So, baseball was my sport. I played catcher, and I still love baseball, but and I love other sports too. But baseball was the sport I grew up playing.
So you grow up playing baseball and other sports, but kind of gravitated toward baseball. You were in high school playing the game you loved, and then you decided amidst all of that, you went on a 2-year mission. Now, just curious. So, also transparency, I'm also a member of the same church. We don't know each other in the church perspective. We are members of both of the same church. So, where did you go serve the mission for your church?
So I went down to New Zealand, Auckland, New Zealand, and spent 2 years there. That's the main sports down there are rugby and cricket. Those are the 2 biggest sports. And, basketball is popular, but nowhere near what rugby is. And then cricket would widely be considered number 2. So, but yeah, I love New Zealand, and it was a long time ago that I was down there. I've been home for 25 years. So, I was there in the mid 90s.
Fair enough. So it sounds like a fun place to be for a couple of years, and I'm sure very rewarding. And now as you're coming back from serving that religious mission, and you're saying, okay, going to go off to college, going to go to school and get a degree, kind of the general track that a lot of people take. I think at that area, as we talked a bit before, you kind of mentioned that you always wanted to play baseball. At that point, you kind of hit the juncture of, hey, well, I love baseball and I'm a sports junkie, probably not good enough to play for college or baseball or go pro or make a career out of it. So at that point, you kind of had to figure out what you wanted to do, went to school. Now, I think the other thing you mentioned is you did your first startup like 2 weeks into your freshman in college. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah. So while I was in high school, I always had a job or multiple jobs. Grew up with a family. There were 7 kids in my family, so 6 siblings, and my parents didn't have a ton of money. My dad did all right, but he's always a hard worker, worked multiple jobs to provide for my family. And with growing up in a family with 7 kids, we always had to work. And I had, when I was a sophomore in high school, I got a summer job working at Nordstrom's doing summer sales and just working there. And by the time I was 18, I was making, in the early 90s, I'm making $11 an hour as a teenager. And I'm thinking I'm doing all right. At the time it was.
Teenager, you think you're rich. You're making all
You
sorts
know.
of money at that point.
I come back from my mission in December 96, and I go back trying to get a job at Nordstrom's where I left off, and they're like, sorry, we don't have that job anymore. We don't have a position open for you, but if you want, you can work for minimum wage and do this. And I'm like, forget that. I'm not gonna go work for, I think it was like $4.75 an hour. So I mean, that was like less than half of what I was making when I left. And so I'm looking around, and nobody would offer me more than $6 an hour as a 21-year-old. And I'm like, I can do better than that. And so, after about 3 weeks of looking for a job, I'm like, well, I'll start my own business. So here I'm starting college, and I end up starting a business, which I had no idea what I was doing, starting my own business, but it ends up, that's what I did going through college. And it took me 6 years to get through college, but, I was able to run my first business going through college, and able to grow that. And so anyway.
So you say, okay, and I get that. And you're saying, hey, I can go work for someone else and I'll make a very small amount of money, or I can go and work myself. And worst case is I won't make any money, but there's a whole lot more of an upside that, likelihood is that you're going to be able to make that money, or make it a much larger amount of money, and it will probably be more beneficial, probably get more experience and everything else. So with that, you go and you do that. And how long did you do that throughout all of college? Do your own business, or was that startup? Did it go anywhere? Did you make money, or how did it work out as you're going through school?
Yeah, so I did it my entire time. It started as a home business, and by the time, before I graduated, I had a retail store, that I was running. I started off as a distributor for one company, and ended up adding products that I would distribute, and I sold mainly throughout the Intermountain region. But it was something that I was able to also sell online. As the .com boom, I started an online store. I started an eBay store, and I was selling products both on eBay as well as on online. And then this retail store that I had downtown Salt Lake City. So I was going to the University of Utah. So I ran that store, from regular business hours, and I was going to classes mainly 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday. So, and not every, different semesters, take one night off or something Monday through Thursday, and not every night, but because it took me longer to get through. But yeah, so it was a full load going through school, to say the least.
Hey, I definitely understand. It took me 9.5 years, including a lot of summer semesters, to get through all of school now. Granted, I did come out with 4 degrees, so it was a bit different, but I definitely get school takes a long time, a lot of effort and a lot of work. So now as you're coming out of school, and I think one of the other things you mentioned as we chatted a bit before the podcast, was you always wanted to be a sports agent, or that was kind of the goal. So I guess 2 questions. One, what did you study in school, and what made you decide that you wanted to be a sports agent?
Yeah, so when I was in high school, I still remember, there was a guy named Lee Steinberg. He came out with a book in the early 90s, called Winning with Integrity. And I'd learned about the sports agent profession when I was in high school. And I thought, hey, this would be cool to do if I can't make it as a player. If I can't make it playing baseball, or, that's something I would love to pursue. It looked cool, and this is before the movie Jerry Maguire come out. And so I'd done a bunch of research, and then of course, Jerry Maguire comes out and makes it all Hollywood, looks all glamorous and stuff. And so going to college, that was my goal. Like, I looked into it, and to be a sports agent, you got to go to college. You got to get there's a process to become an agent. You have to have a degree, and then whatever sport you want to represent players, you have to get licensed by the Players Association. And so the NFL has, the NFL Players Association, NBA Players Association, Major League Baseball, which is different than the NBA and the NFL, but still they have their Players Association, where if you're going to represent players, you have to get licensed through the Players Association. Same with the NHL. And so I'd done enough homework to know that what are the steps, and looking at everything, I chose, when I was early in college, I'm like, okay, I want to graduate. And after I graduate, go get licensed with the NFLPA to work with football players. So that's what kept me going throughout school. School was hard for me. It wasn't a cakewalk. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree, and there's a few classes I failed. It wasn't always, I didn't get A's going through college, but I did it. And I'm running a business going through college, and some months I did better, some years I did better than other years. But I was able to pay for my college, and also get some really good experience running a business, and just working hard going through college. There was very few days off going through college, and doing what I needed to keep my business going, and pay bills and everything. So
no, I think that that's one thing that if I could go and do the college experience again, I didn't have take as many entrepreneurial endeavors until I was well into graduate school, and that's where I first started my first business. But I think it's great to do a business, to go, especially if you ever plan on doing your own business, other than just working for someone. Even if you're going to work for someone else, I think getting that perspective of how to run a business, how to generate clients, how to manage cash flow, and how to do customer service, and maybe hiring or firing, and all those things are great no matter which career field you do. And yet most people come out of college and they don't have very limited or any of that experience. I think it's definitely very valuable. So I think that's awesome that you're able to do it. Plus you can make some actual money while going to school, so so you're not having to rack up the student debts. And so now you're coming out of school and you've got the degree and you've said, okay, I'm going to go and be the sports agent. I'm going to go represent everybody, make lots of money, just like Jerry Maguire, and they're going to show you the money, so to speak. Now, as you're coming out, you went into sports, being a sports agent for about 4 years after college. Is that right?
Yeah. So my bachelor's degree was in business administration. At the time, you didn't have to have a law degree or postgraduate degree to get certified with the NFLPA. So I timed it. I graduated in December of 2002. That was when I fulfilled all the requirements. The NFLPA has a 1-month window every year where people can apply to become a new sports agent, and that is the month of January. And so I got done, and okay, now it's time to get everything and apply. And so I filled out all the paperwork. I paid the fee. It's a $2,500 fee. At the time, I believe it's still the same, $2,500 fee. They do their background checks, and then after they do that all, then they say, okay, you pass this part of it. Now you're going to be able to come take the test and apply. You know, if you pass the test, then we'll tell you, and you become certified. And so every year, after about 2-3 months after your application, then they tell you if you get to take the test, which the test every year is in July. And so you go back to Washington, D.C. They have 2 days worth of meetings at the Ritz-Carlton there in Washington, D.C. You take you listen to the NFLPA, different people that work there come in and go over everything with the collective bargaining agreement, the drug test, or the drug policy, this performance enhancing policy, all those things. And then at the end of 2 days, you take a test, and 66% pass, 33% fail, and it's graded on a curve. And you can get 95% on the test and still fail. So you got to be the top 2/3 in the room to pass. So I did that in 2003, thinking that, okay, I'm going to pass this test and I'm going to be the next great sports agent. And I did pass the test, which was cool. So that was a big thing. Little did I know after I passed the test what I was up against. And so I thought, well, I passed the test. Now I'll just go sign clients. And I thought it'd be much easier than it was. And part of that is, here I'd started a business in 1997, and I grew that business to, 2003, when I took the test, the NFLPA test, my sales for my first business was, I was sole proprietor, just doing my own thing. I almost had $500,000 in sales in the product that I was selling. And I'm thinking, as just out of school, I'm doing all right, and I think, okay, I'm running a successful business. I can make this as a NFL agent. And man, it was a whole lot tougher than I ever expected. And getting guys to sign with you was a whole lot harder than I ever imagined. And the competition in the sports agent space and the money it took at the time, and still does, to succeed as a agent was a lot more than they didn't talk about that in Jerry Maguire. They didn't talk about that in the book, that I'd read. Everything I'd read in the newspaper and the magazines didn't talk about what it really took to make it as an agent. And so I learned real fast that, God, you got to have a lot of money to make it work with these guys. I was able to get 2 clients my first year, and between the unexpected expenses that came with having two clients, and at the same time going through a divorce, I mean, it almost financially broke me my first year. And I had to make some adjustments that I never recovered from. And it was just tough between the divorce and not knowing what I was getting into financially.
I think that and I think that that's the hard thing. Sometimes it's not like what you see on TV, and it's the reality is significantly different. That's kind of when I always joke, I love Shark Tank, and I watch that, I think, almost every episode. And yet everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to have, kind of on a different context than a sports agent, but I'm going to have a great idea. I'll start the business. It's going to be $1 million or, $10 million business in the first year. Money's going to rain from the sky. I'm going to work 5 hours a month, and it's going to be great. And then you get into it, and 99% of the time, it's not anywhere near that. And yet, the good thing is if you knew everything you're getting into and everything is in front of you, you probably would never get or go down that path in the first place. And yeah, so there's always a good, or there is a benefit to a bit of the naiveness, so to speak. But now, as you're saying, okay, going through a hard time, which divorce is definitely difficult, having to figure out the business, more expenses than you would anticipate, harder to land clients. And you did that, I think, for about 4 years, and then you decided to take a break and go work for a startup. Is that right?
So yeah, fast forward to 2007, I've been through a divorce, and I ended up from 2007 to 2013. I had a number of things that I worked for a finance company out of New York for a few years. I worked for a startup here in Utah that led me to LA and some meetings down there with an owner of a different entertainment agency in 2011. And I just did odds and ends things to try to pick myself up, because 2009 came, and after everything, I'd been left in quite a bit of debt. I did go through a bankruptcy, and I think there needs to be a study done. Everybody hears about the number of athletes that go through, the retired athletes that go through bankruptcy. I think just as many agents go through bankruptcy as there are athletes that end up in bankruptcy. And same with divorce. You always hear about athletes within 3 to 5 years of retiring, you're bankrupt, divorced, or whatever. And I'm like, agents have the same thing. And I here, as an agent, I'm divorced and bankrupt, within just a few years of being out. And so I had to do some things to try to pick myself up and get my feet back on. I started working for a startup that didn't pan out. I worked for 2 years for a finance company doing biz dev and operations, a company out of New York. And one of my meetings led me to LA. I was meeting with a owner of an entertainment agency in LA, and for this other startup I was working on. And that meeting, the owner of that agency was like, why don't you come back into business and work for us, and help us get a sports agency side of our business going. And I never wanted to go back in. And it was literally 2 years of talking with the owner of this agency where, he convinced me that he would shoulder all the costs to get going and whatnot. And so I was like, well, if that's going to be the case, and you guys have a name and you guys have money, then it'll be a whole lot easier. And so come to 2013, I decided to get back in the business when going through with this other agency out of LA. And so I go through the process to get research certified with the NFLPA. And it's funny because the guy that helped me get into the business the first time, or inspired me to get in the first time, with Lee Steinberg, ends up taking the test at the same time as me, and we sat on the same row, and I was able to talk to him, and it's just quite interesting to see that, you know, here a kid out of Utah, who obviously he had no idea who I was. He'd inspired me to get into the space, and he had some things happen to him after the whole Jerry Maguire stuff. He had his list of clients before was a who's who quarterback list. He represented Troy Aikman, Warren Moon, Steve Young, and just a bunch of named quarterbacks that everybody that watches football knows. And he ended up losing his license and having to get recertified. Well, he took the test in 2012, a year before I did, and didn't pass. And so he had to retake the test again in 2013. So here he had to wait to get back in the business. And then 2013, he got in, and I was able to meet him when he did. And so I passed the test in 2013, go to work with this agency out of LA. And it was interesting because I knew what I was getting into the second time. And no matter what I said, you know, the agency that I went, I don't think they fully grasped like how hard it was and how much money it took. It really takes a lot of money. When a guy gets out of college playing football at the time, you know, the agent would be fronting the money for training. And it's not just going and getting a membership at, you know, Vasa or Planet Fitness or whatever. You know, when a college football player comes out and they're training from the time their season finishes till the NFL draft, they're training with a professional private trainer. And it often includes a whole lot more than just the trainer. There's a massage therapist, there's a meal prep, there's all the stuff that professional athletes need and do to keep their body right, so that when they go work out for an NFL team, their body is in tip-top shape and conditioning. And so, you know, so they can impress the team, and the team's going to spend a lot of money on them to sign them for their career. So the agent is always fronting that money for the training and for the massage therapist, for the nutritionist, and the different things that the player has. The agent also oftentimes would front the money for rent and other living expenses between that last college football game that they play. Sometimes that's the end of November, sometimes that's the 1st of January, depends on when the player's team is done playing, until the NFL draft, which, like right now, the NFL draft is a week from tomorrow, next week. You know, so you got 4 or 5 months of living expenses that the agent is fronting to cover, in addition to these other training expenses. So it can get expensive covering a player's draft prep and living expenses until that player gets his first check from, you know, the NFL. If he gets a signing bonus, if he doesn't get a signing bonus, it's even harder if they're not drafted and have to wait till training camp, you know, to really get money. So it gets expensive for agents.
So now you get, and that's an interesting walkthrough. And I hadn't thought, I just always assumed that the player had to cover all those expenses, and they are the ones that, hey, they have to train, they have to do all the things. That's interesting that oftentimes goes to the agent. Now the agent gets a lot of money if they do well, and you can sign them and get everything else up, but you have to front it. And it's kind of, you know, I'm sure a bit of the odds game where you have so many that make it and so many that don't. So you get into this, you get, after a period of 2 years, they talk you back into doing it. You go in, you work with them again, you kind of re-enter that. And then I think towards the end of that, you're then saying, okay, it's a lot more expensive, it's a lot more time. It's still hard, or a hard task, and I don't really want to do it. And so you kind of, if I remember right, exited that company or that business and decided to start your own thing, which is what you're doing today. Is that about right?
So yeah. So anyway, from 2013 to 2017, I was back in the business of the agent business. I worked with this company in LA for 2 years. After 2 years, they realized it's a whole lot more money than we expected. And so they bounced out. They just bowed out. They said, we're not going to keep pursuing the football sports representation business. And so we're just going to keep doing what we do well, which is represent entertainers and actors, actresses, musicians. So I was like, well, look, I'm certified. I've got former clients that are coaches. I'm going to still see if I can make it a go. For 2 more years, I worked the business, but I was very cautious to not, I was working to get guys that were out of the business, or sorry, out of college already, in professional, that were looking to change agents, because there's the average NFL player changes agents 3 to 4 times in their career. And so I used my connections to try to grab those clients. And instead of signing clients coming out of college. And I was able to land some clients, but to actually make it a sustainable business, I was not able to do. And so after 4 more years giving it a go, 2017, I bowed out again. And so I'd started a marketing company, which to this day I've continued to run a marketing company, and I've got various clients that my company assists with their marketing needs. And but when I got out of the agent business in 2017, I did see a number of things that were taking place, and I saw a huge opportunity. And that was, at the time in 2017, there's a lot of athletes posting videos on social media, but they're just not they're just not they're not getting anything from them. YouTube existed, but not a ton of athletes were using it. Twitter, Instagram, and Snapchat were the platforms that people were using, and they're just not getting anything for these videos that they're posting. So I'm like, there's got to be a way to build something where fans can come to one place, watch the videos, and as well as to for the athletes to be able to make money. And so I started doing the groundwork for what we've got today, which is athletes.tv. It's literally been almost 5 years in the making of coming from where I've been to where I'm at. And outside of an investment of about $50,000 from my parents, my wife and I have funded everything as far as the development. We've built our own platform, and it's been a lot of work, but at the same time, like, we've now got a platform, and there's been a lot that's happened, especially in this last year, to where our platform is in a position to help a lot of athletes. Essentially, athletes.tv is like a YouTube for sports. And so we've built this, and any athlete can get a channel. If you're a sports podcaster or have sports content, maybe in sports media, people can get a channel on athletes.tv and be able to monetize your video and get a cut of the ad revenue for everything on your channel.
No, I think that's definitely awesome, and sounds like it was a fun journey. You're still getting to continue to be in sports. You're going to say, hey, we're going to a large degree, bootstrap this. We can see a gap in the marketplace kind of in that same sports arena, but we're going to go and tackle something different. So definitely wish you the kind of the best of luck on that. And so now as we kind of catch up to where you're at in the present day, it'd be a great time to ask the two questions I always ask at the end of each journey. Now, just as a heads up, before we ask the two last questions, we also do have the bonus question where we're going to talk a little bit about one crazy idea that Steve's always had. Every entrepreneur has at least that one crazy idea that they always want to pursue someday. So we'll talk about that after we wrap up this normal episode. So if you want to hear that question, make sure to stay tuned. But otherwise, now as we kind of catch up with the present day and shift over to the two last questions, first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What'd you learn from it?
I think the worst business decision I made is not talking to an actual agent before I took the time and spent the money to go get certified as an agent. I know I could have learned a whole lot if I would have spent more time talking to an actual NFL agent before I spent the money, and I think I could have been more prepared had I done that. Reading a book, you don't get all the answers, and you're not able to get everything. And so if you're getting into something, talk to, you want to be a sports agent, talk to, whether it's a current agent or former agent, talk to somebody. Most people will take the time to talk to you. If you want to do something, if you're an entrepreneur out there or want to be an entrepreneur, talk to somebody that is in the field that you're looking to go into, or to the business that you're starting to. I didn't do that, and I think that was it cost me a lot of money to fail as a NFL agent that first time, and it was painful. And I think I could have avoided a lot of the pitfalls by being better prepared. Reading that book and having enthusiasm aren't enough. They help, but that's not enough.
No, and I think that's a great takeaway. And I think that sometimes you always feel like you have to know everything, you have to figure it out all yourself, and you don't have the money or you can't do it. And I think that going and talking to those people and getting some of that expertise and mentorship and feedback and direction can definitely be beneficial. So I think that's a great takeaway. Second question I always ask now is, and kind of dovetails to the first, which is, if you're talking to somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Don't hesitate. Be prepared to work. It's a lot of work. There's a lot more work than you realize, and it doesn't matter what business you're getting into. So if you don't like to work, if you're not willing to work, don't just go work for somebody else, because it's a lot less work working 9 to 5 for somebody else than it is for an entrepreneur. So you better be prepared to work. If you're not willing to put in extra hours, I don't think it's ever going to work as an entrepreneur. That's just my opinion. Everybody I know that's been successful as an entrepreneur has just had a crazy work ethic and been able to, just do what it takes, be able to do things that they never expect to do to make their business work. But those that are willing to put the extra effort in and do things they're not necessarily comfortable in, those are the people that will succeed. Those, making the extra sales call or doing things that, learning a new skill. There's a lot of new skills you learn as an entrepreneur, and if you're not willing to learn new things and to do new things, then it's going to be a whole lot harder. So
I couldn't agree more. And I think that no matter how much you think that you're either the exception or how much is in store, it's always going to be a lot harder than you ever anticipate. And I think that that's just part of the experience, part of the ride, and what you have to be ready for. So I think that's definitely get ready to work as a great piece of advice. So, well, as we wrap up the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Sure. So athletes.tv, simply athletes.tv is our platform. We've got a contact us tab on there, but my email, steve@athletes.tv, people can email me. We do have a crowdfunding campaign right now. So if people want to invest, they can invest in our crowdfunding. That can be found streamingultra.com, and at the bottom of our page, streamingultra.com, which is the actual company parent company of athletes.tv. At the bottom of streamingultra.com, we've got a link to our crowdfunding campaign, so anybody can invest with $100 or more into our crowdfunding. If anybody has an athlete in their family or sports podcast or sports documentary, or and they want to have a channel on athletes.tv, it's free to get a channel. Just go to athletes.tv. They can register and request. After you register, request a channel. Fans can watch all the videos on athletes.tv for free. You don't have to register, but if you do, you can subscribe to your favorite athletes channels on athletes.tv. So, and yeah, if anybody else wants to reach out to me, feel free, but happy to talk to people.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, check it out. If you're an athlete, make sure to take a look. And if you're wanting to invest, definitely a great company to invest in. And now with that, as we wrap up, and again, we got the bonus question after we wrap up, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the show. As a listener, also make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review, because we want to make sure that everyone finds out about all these awesome journeys. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, your trademarks, or anything else, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. So now as we wrapped up the normal portion of the episode and shifting gears just a bit, one of the fun things this always is, if you're anything like me, I'm an entrepreneur that always has a whole bunch of ideas, and I kind of always have that someday pile. Some of the ideas I just throw away and say, yeah, that's never going to work, or I'm never going to pursue it. And then I always have that kind of someday pile that they're my crazy ideas, but I still feel like someday I might have to pursue them, or I might want to do something with them. So within that context, what's kind of your one crazy idea that you always want to pursue and may or may not ever actually pursue?
Well, I love to cook, and I love to make smoothies, and I'd love to open up a restaurant, whether it's a sports bar, sports restaurant, or even just a sandwich and smoothie shop. And so I know there's tons of places to eat and whatnot, but I'm a foodie. So that's one where that in the back of my mind, I'd love to do that. But, I've got a few things on the plate now, so I don't have the time for it. And, I've done a number of different things. It's funny. Yeah. So.
All right. Well, that sounds like a fun idea. I always tell my wife, and I don't think I'll ever actually do it, that I want to do a food truck. And I always think that would be fun to go out and have a food truck, be able to go out and kind of have that experience. And yet likely they'll pursue it, probably low. I don't know that I'll ever actually do it, but in another life, that's what I would always want to do. So I think that sounds like a lot of fun. So with that, we'll wrap up the podcast for there. Thanks again, Steve, for coming on the podcast. It's been a pleasure, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you having me on today, Devin.